is Keys to the Shop, live interviews at Coffee Fest Louisville 2023, Part 2. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to Part 2 of this live interview series with Coffee Fest presenters from Coffee Fest Louisville 2023. This is the second installment, and we have two more professionals to interview and gain some wisdom from this time around. And really quickly, I want to let you know Coffee Fest, of course, where these interviews were taking place, is an incredible resource for you as a professional to help develop yourself and your team, to get insights and resources to run a thriving coffee shop. Coffeefest.com is where you can learn more about upcoming shows. There's Anaheim, California, coming up at the beginning of August. And then in November, we have Orlando, Florida. So coast to coast, lots of opportunities to go. Use the code KEYS, K-E-Y-S, for general admission, 50% off your registration for general admission. So that's KEYS to get 50% off general admission for Coffee Fest. And I'm going to be at these shows. You know, I go to all the Coffee Fest shows. I'm the head judge for Coffee Fest Latte Art World Championship Open. And I also present on various topics as a speaker and trainer. So I will hopefully see you there. Again, check them out and get registered today over at coffeefest.com. Okay, everyone. Well, I want to introduce you now to our last two interviews for this Coffee Fest Live series, and that is going to be Lauren Lathrop and Rob Arnold. So we'll start with Lauren, and Lauren is no stranger to the show, and I've known Lauren for quite a while. Lauren has had a career in coffee that has spanned a couple of decades and has been highly involved in barista competitions and judging, as well as in management and training in coffee and coffee retail, and is currently the expert trainer in roasting over at Mill City Coffee Roasters, and travels with Mill City and the big red truck that goes to Coffee Fest and teaches people the foundations of being a great roaster, gaining consistency, gaining understanding that will exponentially increase your chance of success as you open your roastery, as you seek to improve it. Lauren is an excellent teacher, and that has been something that has been a calling card for a long time. Applied to roasting, it is just wonderful to see the kind of results that roasters get. And that is what we talk about with Lauren today. And by the way, I interviewed Lauren a while ago, and you can find a link to that episode in the show notes here. But getting back to this, we're going to sit down with Lauren to talk about the fundamentals and foundational elements of learning roasting and what training looks like, what you should be focused on, and the experiences that Lauren has had in creating lesson plans and training scenarios for a diverse range of people from across the country and the globe. That's not an easy feat, but if you do it often enough, you walk away with such wisdom. You know, those of us who are training roasters ourselves or are self-taught and have to create like kind of lesson plans for ourselves, really, would do well to listen to Lauren. If not just, you know, be inspired to go take one of these classes from Mill City. I'm really excited that I got the chance to sit down with Lauren live at the show in Louisville. By the way, if you are going to Coffee Fest later this year in Anaheim or Orlando, I'm pretty sure Mill City is going to be at these shows, and you might get to take a class from Lauren. So anyhow, excited for this. I know you're going to get a ton from it. So here now is my conversation all about training and roasting education with Lauren Lathrop. Lauren.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah. It's been a while since we've had you on the show.
When was that?
That was like 4 years ago.
No, because it was when it could have been, because it was right when I joined Mill City, right?
I think it was before Mill City.
When I was still in Portland?
I'm going to have to go back on the books and check.
I just had my 4-year anniversary with Mill City, so that's why that like number sort of sticks with me. But
Okay.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
I'm glad to have you back in person here at Coffee Fest.
Thank you.
And with Mill City, so 4 years now.
Yep.
And you tour around with the big red truck.
It's one of the things that we do. So we came on board with Coffee Fest this year as the roasting education sponsor, which meant that we will be at every event with the truck doing roasting classes, seminars, sessions, just talking a lot about what roasters need to learn, sensory skills, space planning, how to build a brand that scales, and then kind of one-on-one conversations. But, the truck is just one of many tools in our toolkit. We teach a lot more classes at Mill City in Minneapolis.
Right. Yeah. And that's a pretty big facility. You get a lot of people through there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now we're teaching at least one of our roasting 101 classes every month. Current capacity for that class is 20 students from, 12 when we first came back after the pandemic, and the classes regularly sell out. So we're always got 20 students, new roasters, people who are really excited, at least once, sometimes twice a month.
Has it been getting more popular over the course of the 4 years that you've been there?
Yes, and kind of in a different way. I think we're doing something different. Of course, I came and then, previous instructors who had been there for a few years who were doing it their way, we changed the focus a little bit. My background, as you know, maybe some listeners will know, maybe not, is I really come from a retail education background. So hands-on barista training, hands-on coffee skills classes. I was an AST for several years. I learned how to do adult education in coffee skills. And then I came to Mill City without really knowing how to roast, but I really knew how to teach.
Ah.
So, I came on board with Joe Morocco and Derek De La Paz, super talented roasters, really, really skilled coffee guys, but they had never been formally trained to be instructors. So we had this funny thing happening where the class was really valuable, but so exhausting because they had 3 super long days of roasting, really technical, really high level, getting into the weeds about numbers and finish temp and profile and percentages and, pounding in these small data points. And I, as a person who was new to roasting but really familiar with coffee, was this is too ambitious for 3 days. And I could see with the students, after the end of the second day, they were just burnt out because there's a limit to how much new information you can absorb, right? So, when I kind of took over the reins and became director of education, I was let's make this class more digestible and not simplify it, but make it easier to learn from the perspective of how do humans learn stuff. So we slowed down the pace a little bit. We spent a little bit more time introducing core concepts and then built exercises that kind of built on top of each other. So it became easier to know why things were working. And, this is inside baseball, but when you're teaching a class, you're providing a service.
Yes.
And good customer service looks like people leaving the class feeling like they did the thing and they achieved the skill and they got an A, right? And so if you can set students up so that at the end of the class they are executing roast profiles to a high degree of consistency and accuracy, then they leave and they go, oh, I can roast, right? I know how to do this. And that was something that we weren't really doing in our previous iteration of the class. People were roasting a lot, but then they would leave and they would go, oh, sometimes I hit my targets and sometimes I didn't. So I don't know how I feel about this. And roasting seems really hard.
Yeah.
But now, in the current class, we build it so that by your 10th roast of the weekend, I'm hey, Chris, roast this coffee to 405 in 11 and a half minutes. And you're boom, and you nail it.
Nice.
And then you're oh, I can buy a roaster. I can roast my own coffee. It's not easy, but I understand it.
I mean, and there's room to grow, but simplicity retained is better than complexity forgotten.
Totally. Yes.
Right?
And you can learn how to do something like that that's pretty basic and pretty stripped down. And then over the next 5 or 10 years, as you build your business and become a better roaster, you can make things more complicated. You could bring on more challenging coffees. You could create more nuance in your profiles. We just give you the building blocks to take that and make it your own thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really capturing the spirit that is in the entrepreneur who is hungry to learn,
yes,
wants to retain this information,
yeah,
is actually going out on a limb and risking. It's a pride issue. It can be humiliating to learn, but these are adult learners most of the time too, which is even a longer bridge to cross for a lot of people. So if they're disincentivized in the learning process, then they might not pursue betterment in roasting.
But with us, now, you're with us in person for 2 days. We do a half day session that's orientation, and that's virtual.
Yeah.
Again, just to make it easy. These are people who maybe already have a full-time job somewhere else, so they have families. So it's a big ask to like fly to Minneapolis and spend a bunch of time with us. So we try to really make it as accessible as we can. But at the end of those 2 days, they're leaving, they're feeling like, I roasted good coffee, I know why it worked, these machines were really easy to be on, everything felt really attainable, the team at Mill City feels like they're gonna help me in the next couple steps, and yeah, it's just way more positive outcomes for us, long term.
So let's talk about what the core topics are.
Yeah.
When I get into roasting, there is a whole cornucopia of topics
Yes.
that to choose from. And so you as an educator, you curate. You say, actually, you should be learning these things.
Yeah.
So here, you get people from all sorts of backgrounds, sizes of businesses and stuff. So how do you go about curating those topics? What are they? And what does success look like for those things?
Yeah. So, here at a show like Coffee Fest, I ask a couple like easy questions. Most of the people who end up at our truck are people who own cafes, who are buying roasted coffee wholesale from somebody. And they're like kind of starting to flirt with the idea of like, maybe we should roast for ourselves. And so I'm like, cool, what scares you about that? Like, what are you overwhelmed by when you think about doing that? And they're like, oh God, everything. And I did it. There's a woman standing behind you. I had that conversation with her 2 hours ago, and she was like, just the time. I don't know when I'm going to fit it into my schedule. And it's like, oh, okay. So then we talk about how like production roasting works. How, if you buy the right size roaster, you might only need to be on it for, well, in her case, it was 2 hours to get enough coffee just to service what she needed for her cafe. Because she's at a small cafe, low volume. They deal with about 25, 30 pounds a week. On a digital 2K machine, that's less than 2 hours of roasting. So it's like just taking away that like expectation that like this is going to be a huge time suck for you.
Yeah.
For other people, it's green coffee, selection, sourcing, evaluation. How do I know that I'm buying good greens? All of that stuff. And our answer to that is like, well, you don't have to know any of that. Your importer is the expert. So you're just going to partner with a really good importer, and they're going to make great recommendations. They're going to help you source good coffee. They're going to have replacements for your blend components when you need them. You don't have to become a subject matter expert in green coffee yet, as long as you work with someone who is good at that and we can make recommendations. And then the third thing, one thing that we were talking about before we sat down, was sensory skills. People are like, I'm really overwhelmed with this idea that roasters are really good super coffee tasters, and I'm not good at that yet.
Yeah.
And so I taught a seminar on it today, but really it's like, well, come to one of our classes, you'll learn how to cup, you'll learn how to talk about coffee the way that professionals do, and then I'm going to let you know that like, this is a skill, it's a muscle, you're going to exercise it, and the more you do it, the more coffee you taste, the better you will get at it.
It's easy for me as somebody who's coming into this new, having access to all the coffee companies I respect.
Yes.
The micro lots, the new processing methods, the branding. How do I do that now? And that's maybe putting the cart before the horse. And so is there a lack of patience sometimes when it comes to approaching something like this?
Well, I think people underestimate how expensive it is to get the branding right. The design, like I see a lot of people who do a really good job. They buy a great roaster from us. They're buying great green coffee. They're actually spending quite a bit of time trying to nail in the right profile. And then for them, packaging and branding is an afterthought. They put stuff in ugly bags, or they have a really like janky website.
Okay.
And it doesn't activate the coffee well at all. So, I do want people to kind of consider, like, have a plan for that. And the plan can't be like your nephew who knows Photoshop. Like,
or clip art, or whatever.
There should be a little bit of an upfront investment. And look, like it's 2023, there's cool firms, there's people you can hire to help you with this project for a one-time thing, and then you take a good design to a company that does digital packaging, printing with like low minimums, and you get your first run of bags printed, and then you're off to the races. You have something that looks nice.
Okay.
And that is attainable now. I mean, it used to be really hard to get access to that kind of stuff, but now you can find a place that'll do 1,000 bags and just get you going, and that's kind of your first few months of business. So, Yeah, you're not going to start out, competing with Onyx or Black and Bold, but you're going to look to the smaller companies that are doing things well. And what they're doing well is conserving energy. So it's like, when you watch like Top Chef or like my hotel room TV show of choice, which is Beat Bobby Flay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Every time I'm at a trade show, I'm watching a lot of Food Network. The thing you hear over and over in those shows is like, this dish needed editing. And it means like people just threw way too much at the plate and they didn't stop to consider what they could pull away. And a really great coffee company just starting out can be 2 or 3 really great single origins roasted well and a really solid house blend. You don't have to have 12, 13, 16 offerings.
Yes.
You should have 2 or 3 coffees that are distinctly different, maybe one light and maybe one medium or darker. And you should have a really great crowd-pleasing house blend that has components that are easy to replace as they kind of come in and out of availability. And if you just do those things well and roast them super consistently for the first 2 years,
yes,
you bring in customers who are like, oh, this company's like really solid. I know exactly what I'm going to get. People are risk averse. They don't want to switch from their coffee company that they know and love to try out something new to have it be hit or miss,
Yeah.
So just like starting with a small, focused plan to say like, I'm gonna do this really well for a little while, and then when my demand increases, I'm gonna scale up, whether that's like machine size or number of coffees or move into the cafe space or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be everything at once.
It's realistic for you too, because you're going to bite off more than you can chew in terms of what you're able to reproduce consistently, and your skill level. You mentioned in the beginning, it's if you can get a win more consistently with a couple of things versus feeling I kind of know a bunch of things.
Yeah.
It's a
if
lot
you're doing
better.
10 coffees only okay, just do 3 coffees really, really well.
Yeah, hit the mark every time, gain consistency over time, and build capacity through simplicity.
Yeah.
Okay, so then if you're going down the road of trying to develop your skills, your core skills in roasting, is this something that you have to budget a certain amount of time for? How long should it take me to develop these core skills?
So the core skill for a roaster is machine control.
Yeah.
Right? You have a roaster, you should be able to decide, I'm going to roast this coffee from Guatemala. I want to do a medium roast. I want a finish temperature of 411, and I want a profile time of 1125. And you should be able to have enough machine control to get there. And not by accident and know like, oh yeah, it was pretty close, but it was 20 seconds fast, or it was 20 seconds slow, because that will be a very different cup. But machine control is like, I know when to lower gas, when to increase air, so that I can hit that target. That's the bulk of what we work on in class together, is just like, when to do those inputs, how to anticipate changes on the roaster so that it does what you want it to do. Then, kind of what we say, our mantra at Mill City is it takes about 150 batches of coffee, 150 individual roasts to have a really high level machine control and like roaster intuition.
Yeah.
Right? To know like, even if your landmarks haven't changed, you have a sense that like something's gonna be off target. And you can like intuitively go, I'm going to skip that air adjustment because I think I'm actually running a little bit behind.
Oh, okay.
And that's only 150 roasts. If you're on a small roaster, if you buy a 2K roaster and you need to be roasting, 200 pounds a week, you're going to get to that 150 roast number in like a month or 2 months.
Really?
It's not, it's really not that much volume. Now, some people come to us and they're like, I'm going bigger, I'm going home. I'm not starting small. I don't want to outgrow my roaster. I'm going to immediately come in with a 15 kilo because I've got a space for it. And I've got a small business loan. And we're like, okay, good luck. Your minimum batch size on that roaster is like maybe 6 pounds.
Okay.
So every time you roast, you're going to have 6 pounds of coffee that you have to find a home for. So you might not roast many batches every week. It might take you 6 months or 8 months to get, maybe more, to get to that 150 batch goal, because it's just a numbers game. So every time you go to that big roaster, you still feel kind of new, and you still feel kind of, shaky about it.
Okay.
Whereas if you're on a small machine, you hit that target really early on, and then you feel more comfortable bringing in new coffees because you're like, well, I know this tool really well.
Yeah, okay, so people, but when they say that, want to go big and go home, they're planning for capacity.
Yeah.
They think, okay, people are going to love my coffee, they're going to be ordering lots of it.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I almost feel like, yeah, you should expect to be successful, but practically speaking, like they don't want to go get a super small machine.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to get a tabletop roaster and then all of a sudden they need to buy another roaster. So they don't want to spend that money. So how do you balance that?
We push a lot of people towards a tabletop machine.
Yeah?
Because when your business grows and you're ready for a production roaster, you will also need a sample roaster.
Okay. Yes.
So you already have it in your space, and you've roasted 1,000 batches on it. So it feels like an extension of your own hand. You're super comfortable with it. I mean, you don't know, but there's a person sitting behind you that is like one of our success stories, a person who started on a 500-gram sample roaster in his garage. So he's roasting 1 pound at a time. And he was like, I'm just going to do this for fun and see where it goes. He ended up, selling at farmers markets. Before he knew it, everyone in his small town was buying coffee from him.
Yeah.
He was roasting 40 hours a week on a 500-gram roaster.
Wow.
He roasted 6,000 batches on that 1 pound roaster. We were like, you're insane. But he was like, I don't know what happened, and not everyone accidentally becomes this successful, but he came back to us in less than a year and bought a 6 kilogram.
I was going to say, time to upgrade.
It was time to upgrade, and really what he was doing was just buying back 30 hours of his own week, because he's a dad and he's got other stuff going on, so he needed that time back. I don't think that there's anything wrong with starting small and, crafting that skill set and getting really good at it, because he came back to class a second time when he bought his new big machine, because he's like, well, I should come back and learn on the big roaster too. He was the best roaster we've ever had in class.
Just because of that experience.
Just because of those numbers, yeah.
Wow.
It was incredible to see. So I don't think it's scary I don't think people should be scared of outgrowing that small machine quickly. That's the best case scenario.
Okay.
Right? And it's not going to be a hindrance to you. I mean, if you have to, you can sell the machine. They don't lose their value. We would rather you keep it because it's going to be a tool for you.
I agree. Okay, great. That's awesome. I am thinking about what you said earlier, and you have to find a home for that coffee.
Yes.
And when you're experimenting as a roaster, is it just what do you recommend people do with that coffee if they're not happy with it? Is it just you take your customers on this journey of ups and downs with you and baked coffee and
well, hopefully if you get a couple customers, you should be giving them the best thing that you're producing and the most consistent thing that you're producing. So hopefully you do dial in a few profiles that you can count on and that are good. The experimentation does need to happen because it's how we learn. Those should be the smallest batch size that you can control in your roaster. So for our machines, that's a 20% capacity. So if you're on a 6K roaster, that's actually just a 1 kilogram, 1.2 kilograms. So that's the amount of coffee that you're workshopping and that you're trying new things with. That helps minimize that waste. Yeah, some roasts won't work out, some roasts will. That's kind of Mill City has a program called Friends and Family, where once in a while we have so much coffee in the roastery because we've been dialing in new machines, or we've been teaching a bunch of classes, or we had some old greens that we need to run through. Every employee at Mill City, and we're not a big company, we have 14 employees. We have 2 names on a mailing list with addresses, and every few months, those 2 names just end up with a bag of coffee in the mail, with love from Mill City. And our graphic designer always designs a really funny label for it because it's look, this is just extra coffee that we didn't need to send anywhere. Now, obviously, we can do that. We don't make money on it. It's not being sold, but it is getting it out to people, and it is not wasting a precious resource that human beings worked really hard to get to us. Yeah. So it's really honoring, all of that kind of seed to cup story that we've been teaching people about for years and years. And I think new roasters should have a similar program. It should go to your friends, it should go to your family members. You should be drinking a lot of it because that is very valuable coffee to taste and to learn from. And you can find a way to, if you want to sell it at cost to your local church, fire station, school district, just to get it brewed and in cups and at least cover the cost of you learning, then there are ways to do that.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. I know locally Quills here has every year called Lump of Coal.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's not good coffee.
Just-
and it says it on the label.
Yeah, we didn't do good with this one.
Yeah.
It needs cream and sugar.
Have fun. Give it to your enemies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so last question here is you do formal education for roasting.
Yeah.
When people come to these classes, now they leave the classes, and then they have the classroom of experience. But then they're going to consume information outside of that.
Yes.
And they are the ones who are curating their own consumption of information.
Yes.
So as an instructor who's used to doing this for other people, how do we do this for ourselves when we're not in an actual formal class?
Like ongoing and continuing education for ourselves.
Yeah, like sifting through what's good and what's BS, and what should I spend time with and absorb now and not.
I'm wary of anyone who is like portraying a message that they have all the right answers and that they have it all figured out and that they're infallible. I don't take any of those people seriously. So I edit, if someone's just kind of like, oh, well, it's just, this is the one right way to do it, and it's black or white and there's no gray area. So I'm not consuming any of their intel.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend that our students do either. And, we have so many friends who are so good at coffee and so good at branding and roasting and marketing. And so I look to people in my community who I think are doing a very good job, and I'm learning from them. We always tell our students, there's a lot of information about roasting out there. There's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of message boards, forums, YouTube channels. You should not be learning from anyone whose coffee you cannot buy.
Oh.
And you should not be learning from anyone whose coffee you do not like.
Wow, okay.
And honestly, if you think of how many people do you know who do roasting education or build roasters that roast coffee commercially? Not very many.
Yeah.
So we have a toll roasting program. We have a private label roasting program. We sell roasted coffee like sensory kits on our website called brew boxes, which are ways that we teach people about green coffee or roasted coffee through like a tasting flight.
Yeah,
but it's just a way for us to put our money where our mouth is and say, like, here's our roasted coffee. Do you like this? Right?
Sure.
This was roasted by us on our equipment. So we're really trying to walk the walk and show people, like, we're not just telling you how to do it, we can show you too.
That's good. There's a lot of transparency there. And how does it taste?
How does it taste?
Yeah, that's the mantra.
Because that's the first thing, someone will email in with a roast profile and say, is this good? Or I see this on Reddit a lot. People will post a picture of their roasted coffee and say, is this good? And it's like, dude, what?
I know. Yes.
Yes, it looks brown.
So
brown.
Like,
yeah, and that's the first thing people say, like, put it in the cup, how does it taste? And that's the first thing I tell, people when they email our curve. I'm like, is there a problem with the flavor of the cup? Or why are you sending me this curve?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, because I just want you to tell me if it looks good. And I'm like, looks good compared to what?
Can you just tell me that I look pretty? I mean,
yeah, beautiful curve.
Yeah, nice.
Well
nice.
done. It's just numbers. It's just data. It doesn't tell me anything about the quality of the coffee.
Sure.
So, yeah, look to people who are doing a good job, listen to them, and try to filter out the noise, especially if it's people who you can't verify their expertise.
Nice. Well said. Lauren, I'm glad for experts like you.
I'm doing my best.
Yes.
Caught me at the end of the first day of a trade show. So.
Oh yeah, it's a little. We're all a little frazzled here, but we're doing all right. So Mill City, where can we go to learn more information?
MillCityRoasters.com. Our headquarters is in Minneapolis. We do in-person training once a month. We do virtual training a few times a year, but we're just real people. We are a machine manufacturer. We are an education resource. If you call our phone number, a human being answers the phone.
Ooh. Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. So we try to make ourselves really accessible. We're on Instagram. We've got several hundred hours of content on YouTube from myself and many other experts who have worked there.
Lovely.
And yeah, we're easy to find.
Great. Thanks,
cool.
Lauren.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, everybody, I hope that what you took away from this time with Lauren is that education on roasting doesn't have to be complex. And repeatability is such a virtue when it comes to what you do. Obviously, consistency is so important for your customers. And, take what she has said here and apply it to your roasting journey. If you have to create your own lesson plan, focus it in on that ROI. Keep it simple for yourself. Make sure that you end up with something repeatable and, incrementally increase your capacity from there. Take it from an expert educator like Lauren. This is the way. So, big thank you to Lauren for joining us on the show. If you want to learn more about what's on offer over at Mill City Roasters in terms of education or the roasters themselves, go check out millcityroasters.com. Now, our final interview here is another local Louisville entrepreneur who founded a company that has combined sports with coffee and also cocktails. And we were talking with Rob Arnold, who is the founder of Pregame Coffee. Rob is somebody who I've watched his journey, like literally watched his journey for the past few years now. I used to work part-time as a barista, and he would come in and he'd be working on his business plan, and he opened his first space, and it was really great to see just the tenacity and everything coming to fruition. The cocktails, the sports, and coffee. He had to move his space to a new place that actually turned out to be much, much better than his first one, and made the concept and the dream of this unique hybrid come to life. So it's really been fun to see. And one of the things that is a cornerstone of this business, on top of the very seamless and well done integration of sports, is the cocktails, not just coffee cocktails, but also cocktails. We are in bourbon country, and so ergo, there is a lot of opportunity for that. But beyond that, Rob has done such a great job pursuing a more culinary route when it comes to the beverages and signature drinks. That is what he presented on in this trade show at Coffee Fest in Louisville. And so that's what we talked about. We did talk a tad about how this shop had come to be, but then we zero in on signature beverages, crafting cocktails in general, and how this can work for you based on Rob's experience with his own laboratory, aka his business, and the great reception that a lot of these things and these creations have got from the local community. So always love Rob's energy and spirit. Again, great to see the success that he's had. I hope that you enjoy this. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Here now is my chat on cocktails and signature drinks with Rob Arnold of Pregame Coffee. Rob Arnold of Pregame Coffee, welcome.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. Before we even get started, I just wanted to say how much of an honor it is to be with you. You saw me early in the days of my research phase, and one of the very first pieces of research that I ever did was research podcasts. I found literally the first one I found was Keys to the Shop podcast, and I started listening, and I saw online that you were in Louisville. I'm like, I got to find this guy. And then I recognized one of the pictures of where you worked at that time, and I'm like, okay, I'm going there. And
nice.
I
have seen you from the beginning growing this business at Pregame Coffee, and it's really been fun. You've got it's not a second location, but it's a second version, and there's a whole story behind that, but you've been just going at it really hardcore from the very time you got that twinkle in your eye that you wanted to have a coffee shop. So briefly tell us, what is Pregame Coffee and how did that really come to fruition for you?
So Pregame Coffee came about from me simply just wanting more from my own experience. You can get a good cup of coffee at a lot of places. Louisville is loaded with several shops that have fantastic coffee.
Yeah.
But the shops themselves are all similar. It's all the same experience of going to a shop. And so I was writing a book on healthcare because I had grandiose ideas on changing the healthcare system. And I was doing it in coffee shops, and I just wanted more from my own experience. The coffee was great everywhere I went, but I wanted more. And whether that be a cocktail or catching a game on TV or something, and there's literally one TV in all of the coffee shops in all of Louisville. And I thought, this is odd. And I realized people don't necessarily go to coffee shops to watch TV.
Right.
But I personally wanted something more from the experience. And so, but I didn't want to go to a sports bar. I didn't want to go to a bar. I didn't want to go to Buffalo Wild Wings because that's not conducive to working. like a coffee shop is.
Right.
And so I said, well, I jotted some ideas down, and I presented the ideas to my wife, and she said, this is dumb. But then I started really researching it, and I started going into other coffee shops and counting customers, listening to the economics of what was being ordered, looking at the menus, like looking at pricing, researching the wholesale cost of stuff, and building a business plan from there. And my first person I had to convince again was my wife.
Yep.
And said, listen, I've done all this research. What do you think? And she said, looks great. That was pre-COVID.
Oh, sure.
And then I got my first round of funding 2 weeks before everything shut down during COVID. And I sat on money, and then a place that I was familiar with opened up, a location, and I thought it would have been a great place, but it wound up turning into a bad location. Yeah, that's how I got started. Opened up September 4th of 2020 when I couldn't have customers inside the shop.
Yeah.
So,
yes, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now this new location that you've moved from that one that didn't work out, but this new one is just, before we started recording, you said 1,000% better.
Yeah.
It's on a well-trafficked street in the town here in Louisville. It's on Frankfurt, right?
Yeah, it's on Frankfurt Avenue here in Louisville. The building itself is kind of a landmark building in Louisville, where a guy that used to live in it sold junk and souvenirs and antiques, and the entire property was just loaded with all this junk. He was on that show American Pickers once. And
wow.
Yeah, and there's a literal train car on the property. And so when people ask where I'm at, I say go to Frankfurt Avenue and look for the train car.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so this space now is the synthesis of Rob's head, what Rob wants to do in a coffee shop and offer that to other people, which is really, honestly, a lot of people probably have similar ideas and they just think they're weird, like no one would want this, but you'd be surprised at how many people actually they're your people. They vibe with what you're doing, and you've
Absolutely.
seen some good success with this in the last, how long has this new space been open?
We've been open about 8 months.
Okay.
And it's funny because I have an upstairs space, and that upstairs space, I was a little nervous about. I was excited but nervous. I'm like, I'm getting all this extra space. How am I going to fill it? But I have a theater up there with a 155-inch projection screen, and every Sunday morning during Formula One races, I have, of all people, Formula One people coming in to watch the race that's in Monaco or Saudi Arabia or wherever,
Right.
because they're at different time. It's across the country, and the race is at like 8 a.m. And so they come to the shop at 8 a.m. to watch Formula One racing in my theater.
It's so funny because in a lot of cafes, Italian cafes and other South American, Central American cafes, they're going to be playing the soccer games on TVs also.
It's funny you say that because when I started going down this path, I researched the historical context of an Italian cafe. It's a gathering place where people would go and talk about politics and sports, and just the community would come together and talk about things. And I said, I want that.
Yeah.
I want a place where people can come and gather and talk about things. And my upstairs space is just that. We have a couple of local soccer teams, professional soccer teams here in town, and the entire team will come and watch a game.
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
The entire team will come and watch a game there. Customers will see that they're there, and they'll be like, oh, that's racing. Those are the players from racing or Lou City Soccer. And it's really cool to see like the customers interact with the team, and it's a way for the teams to interact with the general public, that they and create that community. And that's something that I really wanted to establish, was a sense of community with the space.
That's great. And community takes all forms. And like to your point in the beginning, coffee shops can tend to look similar, but then there's all these other types of ways we can gather and commune together. And the drinks themselves, let's get into this because you're kind of like hyper-focused this weekend as a speaker on cocktails and signature beverages. And as I've seen you operating, you've always been working on something behind the bar. There's always a bottle or 7 behind the bar, And so you've been really big, especially into the cocktails and including spirits. Talk a little bit about how you approach that in the coffee bar setting in a way that complements coffee, but also will satisfy somebody who's actually looking for a cocktail that tastes good too?
Yeah. So I wanted something more from my own experience, and that was whether to get a beer or a cocktail or whatever. And so when I started going down this path, I said, well, that's got to be part of it. And again, listening to your podcast, you had Matt Foster on a couple of years ago.
Right.
And so I reached out to Matt Foster, and I happened to be taking a family trip to St. Louis, which is where he is from. And I reached out to him, I was like, hey, can we chat? And so he just gave me some general ideas on what he puts into the coffee cocktails. And for anyone that doesn't know, he's a former world coffee cocktail champion. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to pick his brain. I've listened to that single podcast with you and him probably 5 times, and because I wanted to learn more about it. I don't come from this world, so I wanted to learn more from the people that are actually into it. And you've said you've come to the shop, and like I'm always creating. I call it my lab, and I'm always trying to figure stuff out, like what alcoholic beverages go with what coffee beverages. How can we blend the two? How can we make it like a perfect cocktail of both? I got this book called The Flavor Bible, and that Flavor Bible it was recommended to me by a local chef. It's written by chefs and bartenders around the world, and it literally just tells you what flavors go with what.
Yes, it's a great book.
It is unbelievable, and it's hilarious. As a side note, for coffee, literally the only flavor that says do not put with coffee, can you guess what it is?
Is it mint?
Lavender.
Lavender, and everyone's doing lavender.
Everyone's doing lavender lattes. And that's literally the only flavor it says to not put with coffee.
Interesting. And yet people will buy it and they're like, we like this. Personally, I'm not a big lavender and coffee fan myself. It's like a deodorant in a cup, but you know.
But it's something that's with that, like I learned not to put a lot of fruity flavors with coffee.
Yeah.
Because they go really well with cocktails, and a lot of my coffee cocktails have fruity flavors like cherry or blueberry or whatever. But for typical coffee drinks, I don't put that in there because to me they're very contrasting flavors, and they kind of one will overpower the other.
Yeah, so there's a balance that you're always looking for. So there's creativity and presenting a well-researched drink. So it's not just that you're experimenting on your customers. You're experimenting and then you're saying, I think this tastes really good and I'll bring it out to my customers. So like you could be going the direction of just overwhelming them with a lot of underwhelming experiences.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's the process typically if, say, in 2 months from now, you're going to come up with a cocktail at your coffee bar? What does that look like now versus when you were first starting?
The big thing that I look for is the ease of making the drink. Because you're in a coffee shop, whether it's high volume or whatever, you need to be able to make that drink at a moment's notice and not have 9 different ingredients for this cocktail, which some mixologists really like to I'm going to put 10 mLs of this in it and 1 gram of this in it. And for me, it's like, okay, I like to create all these things, and then I say, okay, how can I simplify this? Let's make it as simple as possible, but create this exact same experience for the customer. It's just like you've participated in all these latte competitions before, and when I talked to Matt, with coffee cocktail competitions, you're going to have 10, 12 different ingredients put into these competitions, but you're not going to put that on a bar. You're going to put something that maybe resembles that drink, but you're going to simplify it as much as possible. And that's what I try to do because I know that my baristas are not bartenders. I know that they want to create as simple as drinks as possible. So let's make it for them to where they can recreate the experience for the customer and ease up on their workload as well.
There's kind of there's a balance to that too, though, right? Because a barista, if left to their own devices, would be like, well, how much more simple can it get? Can I just pump syrups into the cup?
100%.
Yeah, so you have to be like, there's a limit. I want a certain amount of work and complexity to this thing.
Yeah.
So it actually is not just boring, right? Because you could go too far and it would be boring.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because you want to be able to create something that is unique to the customer and that is not overbearing on the barista. Our number 1 selling drink in the shop is called a Kentucky Coffee. It has 4 ingredients: cold brew, bourbon, vanilla, brown sugar.
Easy.
It's super simple to make, but as you well know, a lot of the work goes into the cold brew process. What does your cold brew taste like? Because it's a 2-to-1 mix of cold brew to bourbon. And so you need to have a good cold brew that goes into this drink. Because if you have a bad cold brew, it's a 2-to-1 mix of that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bad drink.
Yeah, you've batched. And some people might think that's cheating, to batch your ingredients. They want to see you like squeeze the lime right then and there. They want to see you do all that stuff in the immediate. But that efficiency creates more dependable experiences and consistency with the signature drink or whatever it is. So locally, creating signature drinks in my past, it's been, okay, yes, like you say, how can we get 17 people to make this the same way every single time? It's fine for you to do it in your kitchen, but it needs to translate at scale, right? So then it has to also make sense for pricing, right? So you might have 4 ingredients, but they might be really expensive ingredients. So with bourbon, you could choose from lots of here in Kentucky.
With the Kentucky coffee, I went through about 10 different bourbons before I found the right one.
Yeah.
Because I found that the rye content, and this is where we get into the science of bourbon, the mash bill and the rye content of bourbon, of bullet bourbon, blended really well with the cold brew.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I learned that it didn't work with a bunch of other bourbons, but with this particular one, that was it. That was the signature. And then I've had customers ask for other types of bourbons into the Kentucky coffee, and I tell them it's not going to taste the same. It's not going to taste as good because the ingredients are a little different.
Do you just do pours of bourbon as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually, so one of my, in learning about the coffee cocktail world was the Cafe Corretto from Italy.
Right, yep.
And how that dates back to the 1940s. And it's something that I wanted to learn about, and it's as basic of a cocktail as possible. It's 2 ingredients. It's liquor, whatever liquor you want. They primarily use grappa, and then espresso.
That's it, yeah.
And that's it. That's all it is. And so that's something that I wanted to expand on from your basic espresso martini, Irish coffee, Cafe Corretto, learn the historical context of those, and then go to the next level.
Now, a signature drink versus a cocktail, which is also a signature drink, but there are signature drinks that are not cocktail based, and I imagine you have both. How do you go about the non-cocktail version of a signature drink so that it's distinct on the menu and people know in it? Just talk a little bit about that.
Again, I try to look for simplicity, and I assume that my baristas have minimal experience. Even if they have 3 or 4 or 5 years of experience, I assume that they have little experience of making signature drinks. So again, our number one latte drink is a Sting Like a Bee, which is caramel, brown sugar, honey, espresso, milk. That's it. But it comes down to the ratios of everything. Everything, as you well know, everything comes down to the right ratio and how it mixes with everything. And so we have the right measuring devices for all of the ingredients to make sure that it's consistent regardless of whether myself is back there or with one of my baristas back there, or if I put my wife back there who's never made a cocktail or a latte in her life.
Okay.
They can measure everything accordingly. It's just like baking and making sure that the right measurements are put into that drink.
Training people to do this is about not only accuracy, of course, like you're saying, but speed as well. And when you're working in a coffee bar, often you're working with people whose past experience is not as deep, right? So what does it take on a menu that's not just coffee, it's also signature drinks, but it's not just signature drinks, it's also coffee cocktails, right? That seems like a lot.
Workflow. Establishing the right workflow at the bar. And again, one of your previous podcasts, you talked to, I believe, a guy from Centergoss, which
Brian
is here.
Soder.
Yeah. And that was his, like the entire hour of the podcast, he was talking about workflow.
Yep.
And I was like, this is fantastic. So as somebody that didn't come from this world, I really studied workflow and how to make everything as seamless as possible to where I don't have to take more than 1 to 2 steps from any point in the bar and I have 100% of my ingredients. All of my cocktail stuff is behind me, and all of my coffee stuff is in front of me. So if somebody gets a cocktail with coffee, I can literally just do one thing in front of me, turn around, do an about face, get one thing behind me, step one step to the side, and serve the customer.
Yeah.
Everything is in 1 to 2 steps, and so that way the workflow of that space, whether it's for myself or my baristas or anybody that wants to come in, everything is right there within 1 to 2 steps, and they don't have to venture far to get an ingredient.
That's great. That's excellent point. And added to that, the mantra I've been saying this whole weekend in my sessions is you start with the menu first, and you go from there. You imagine what it's going to be like to work in this space. And then when you are working in this space, it's like, oh, I've already been working here.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier and it's faster. And so when you're talking on this podcast, of course, everyone's coming from different regions. This is Kentucky, so bourbon is pretty central. But there's also different flavors that different regions have. So is there, I guess people would just have to figure out what are the biggest headline flavors in their area and do that. And how often should we be turning our menus over in signatures and in cocktails and stuff?
It's funny you say that because I had the same menu for 2 years, or for a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
I had the exact same menu, and I always do a drink of the week, and just to see what customers think, and it gives me ideas. Okay,
Yeah.
they really like that. They really like that drink of the week. That's good. Maybe we'll add that again at another drink of the week. But then there's been recently at the new space, because it is much busier, I'm able to get much more feedback. And so what I did recently was I took a couple of menu items off, added a couple of really popular drinks of the week. There's one drink that one of the local universities here, all of the students were getting it. And it was a drink of the week, and I didn't have a name for it. It was some blanket sports name because our thing is sports at pregame. But I put it on the menu, and I named it the Spalding, because all of the students went to Spalding University.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, that's the Spalding.
It is yours.
It's their drink, and they took ownership of it. And it's something that I thought was really cool to give back to my customers. Hey, you guys thought this was popular. I'm going to name it after you guys. You guys have a little bit of ownership on this drink. So, hey, this is for you.
That's interesting. And sometimes it's the reverse, too. The name attracts people, and they're like, I want that cool name.
Yeah.
I want the sound of the sting like a bee. That's really interesting. I'll try that. And if it's even moderately good, I think people just like saying the word. So it's like the whole package, right? It has to look good, has to taste good, be fast, efficient to make, and give it a good name, I guess.
Yeah.
Also.
Well, and I won a cocktail contest a year and a half ago, something like that. And what won the contest, I mean, it was a good drink, but I really feel that what really won the drink was the story behind it.
Oh, yeah.
And what went into making the drink and why I chose ingredients. And I think that that's really big, and why people try things, and when they hear the story of why you chose that one ingredient.
Yes.
The Sting Like a Bee, we're in Louisville. Sting Like a Bee, Muhammad Ali. I wanted to pay tribute to Muhammad Ali, so what can I do that pays tribute to Muhammad Ali? His famous saying, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Honey. I wanted to get some honey involved. I wanted to get some caramel. What goes off with honey? Caramel. The flavor Bible I spoke about earlier. So you grab one ingredient and you say, okay, what goes with that one ingredient? And then you create a chain of ingredients that all play off of each other, and that's where the Sting Like a Bee came from. That's where I used to have a cinnamon toast. That's one of the drinks I took off. Well, butter, cinnamon. I put butter and cinnamon in a coffee drink, and people are like, well, why would you, isn't that just a bullet coffee? I'm like, no, not at all. This is different. I really feel that people latch on to the story behind a drink and why you chose those ingredients.
That's good. Well said. Yeah, it's been good to talk about this, Rob. Thank you for sitting down with me. So where can people go to learn more about pregame? And see you if they're in Louisville.
I'm on all the social networks, Pregame Coffee, if you just type that in on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. Pregamecoffee.com is our website. If you want to email me directly, rob@pregamecoffee.com, or stop by the shop here in Louisville at Frankfurt Avenue. We're at 1737 Frankfurt Avenue here. Again, you can't miss it. It's got a literal train car on the property.
Look for the train.
You look for the train car on the property, and you can't miss it.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Well, here Rob echoes what I've heard from many people, which is there is creativity and then there's also a balance of simplicity. You still have to invest a lot of time and effort into making sure these flavors and these concepts work, but they also have to work in terms of time, not just taste, and the different touch points that you have involved. It's no good having a drink that's, 10 minutes long to prepare. You're not going to make enough money on that. But generally, the idea of keeping it simple doesn't mean that it can't be also unique. And so take a page from Rob's playbook, get a little out of the box, take some inspiration from far-flung places, always be a learner, and experiment with things and figure something out that is so unique to you. It can't really be copied, even if it is, you're already such an expert in this point in your business that you can just iterate something in another direction. And this is what creativity is all about, and getting better at creating things for your customers that complement your coffee and just offer them something that is of your space. And I'm glad that Rob found this wonderful space and home for this concept, and that his customers are on the receiving end of craft and art in beverages. So big thank you to Rob for joining us on the show. You can follow him on Instagram. Follow Pregame Coffee. It's at Pregame Coffee over there on Instagram. So with that, that is the end of our episode and the end of this series of interviews from Coffee Fest Louisville. I hope that you have enjoyed these conversations and that you enjoy this whole series of sit-downs with these presenters at Coffee Fest. Let me know what you think. Chris at keystotheshop.com. That's how you can reach out to me. You can always DM me on Instagram as well. That's great. I'm always very responsive. Might send you a voice memo, text, or something like that, but I like to chat with people, I'm a verbal processor. That's how it works. So anyway, reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com if you have any questions, comments, etc., or if you want to work with me and do some one-on-one coaching and consulting for your coffee business, Chris at keystotheshop.com. And don't forget to look into Coffee Fest, by the way. These interviews are just a sample of the kind of value that you can get live in the moment at Coffee Fest. Check them out over at coffeefest.com. And with that, I say goodbye. Thank you so much. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.